You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple: subscribe. We're almost at 9,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion, or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. The waves outside Dr. Anne Fletcher's office window crashed against the rocky Maine coastline with the same relentless rhythm they had for thousands of years. Inside her office at St. Michael's Psychiatric Hospital, the sound was muted, distant, like a memory of violence rather than the thing itself. She sat across from the camera crew, her hands folded on the desk, a thick case file resting between them. Behind her, shelves lined with patient records stretched to the ceiling, but one file was noticeably thicker than all the others. Its edges were worn from countless readings, pages marked with coloured tabs, notes scrawled in margins. In 23 years of practice, she began, her voice steady but tired, I've treated over 400 patients. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, PTSD. I've seen people at their absolute worst, and I've helped most of them find their way back. She paused, glancing at the thick file. Only one has ever made me question the nature of reality itself. The security footage rolled silently on the monitor beside her. It showed a man in his late 30s, thin but not frail, sitting perfectly still in a small room. His eyes were fixed on the window, on the ocean beyond. His lips moved occasionally, forming words no one else could hear. Thomas Hartley doesn't think he's sick, Dr. Fletcher continued. He thinks he's already dead. Has been for 6 years. And the worst part? She looked directly into the camera, and for just a moment, her professional composure cracked. Sometimes late at night when I review his case, I can't find a single piece of evidence to prove him wrong. The documentary's title card appeared. The Night I Met Satan. Home video footage filled the screen, sun-bleached and jittery. A 4th of July barbecue, 2016. Thomas Hartley stood in the backyard of a modest house in Bangor, Maine, flipping burgers while friends laughed around him. He was younger then, his face fuller, his smile easy. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, ran up and wrapped her arms around his legs. Higher, Daddy! Push me higher! The camera panned to show Thomas pushing his daughter on a tire swing, her laughter piercing the summer air. He was singing to her some made-up song about clouds and sailboats. His voice was off-key but full of love. The image froze on Thomas's face, caught mid-laugh, the sun haloing his head. Diane Hartley sat in a different room now, older and harder around the edges. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago, but she still wore her wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Her hands wouldn't stop moving, twisting the chain, letting it go, twisting it again. Tommy was a good man, she said, and her voice carried the weight of past tense, of irrevocable loss. The best man I ever knew. He'd wake up early on Saturdays to make Emma pancakes shaped like animals. He'd read to her every night, doing all the voices. He made me laugh when I didn't think I could. She looked down at her hands, at the ring. When the recession hit in 2016, the construction work dried up. Then, the electrical jobs. We went from comfortable to struggling in 6 months. Tommy took it hard. Not because of the money really, but because he couldn't stand the idea of not providing for us. His father had abandoned them when he was 9, and Tommy swore he'd never do that to his own child. More photos flashed across the screen. Thomas at a job site, tool belt slung low on his hips, squinting in the sun. Thomas and Emma at Acadia National Park, standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Thomas alone in their kitchen, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, his face grey with exhaustion. He came home one night in December 2017, Diane continued, and told me he had enrolled in the Merchant Marine. 90-day contracts, good pay, benefits. He said it would fix everything. I begged him not to go. I told him we'd sell the house, move in with my parents, figure something out. But he'd already made up his mind. She wiped her eyes. The last thing he said to me, standing in our driveway with his duffel bag, was, "I'm going to make you proud." And I told him I was already proud, that I didn't need him to prove anything. Her voice broke. But he went anyway, and the man who came back, that wasn't Tommy. That was something else wearing his face. The screen showed Thomas's Merchant Marine Training Certificate, dated January 2018. Then, his crew identification badge, the photo showing a man trying very hard to look confident. His eyes betrayed him, though. There was fear in them, the kind that comes from knowing you're about to do something irrevocable. The final image was a text message timestamped January 12th, 2018, 6:47. 90 days and I'm home. Tell Emma I love her. Tell her Daddy's going to fix everything. Below it, a response from Diane, sent at 6:52 a.m. We love you too. Come home safe. He never responded. The Atlantic Duchess was not a beautiful ship. At 590 feet long, she was a bulk carrier built in 1994. For function, not form. Her hull was rust-streaked, her deck cluttered with equipment that had been repaired more times than replaced. She transported iron ore from Newfoundland to Rotterdam, and she did it efficiently if not elegantly. Henry Gibson had served as her first mate for 6 years, before retiring to a small house outside Halifax. He sat on his porch now, the ocean visible in the distance, and spoke about the ship with the affection one might have for an old, reliable dog. She wasn't fancy, but she was solid, he said, his voice carrying the distinctive rhythm of someone who'd spent more time at sea than on land. We'd had the same core crew for years, 22 men total. We knew each other's rhythms, quirks, weaknesses. When you're at sea for months at a time, that familiarity becomes essential. You need to know who you can trust when things go wrong. He paused, looking out at the water. We should have known who we could trust. But we didn't. And that's what killed us. The crew manifest appeared on screen, a list of names and positions. Working class men from Maine, Massachusetts, Newfoundland. Ages ranging from 23 to 58. Beside each name, a small photograph. Ordinary faces weathered by wind and work. Thomas Hartley came aboard in January 2018, Gibson continued. Greenest man I'd ever seen. Seasick the first 3 days, but he was eager, polite, took the worst shifts without complaining, night watch, bilge maintenance, whatever we needed. Gibson's expression darkened. He asked me once, maybe a week in, if I believed in ghosts. I laughed it off. Told him every ship has stories. But he wasn't joking. He said his grandmother told him before she died that the ocean remembers everything. Every ship that sinks, every man who drowns, the water holds on to them, doesn't let them go. He looked at the camera. I should have paid more attention to that conversation. Footage showed the Atlantic Duchess departing Halifax Harbour on January 15th, 2018. The water was grey and choppy, the sky threatening snow. On deck, barely visible, a figure stood at the rail, watching the land disappear. Thomas Hartley beginning his first voyage. It was supposed to be routine, Gibson said. 21 days to Rotterdam, offload, pick up machinery parts, 21 days back. We'd done it 100 times. He looked directly at the camera. But the ocean doesn't care about routine. And some voyages you don't come back from. Not really. Thomas's letters home arrived sporadically, depending on satellite availability. Diane had saved them all. She kept them in a shoebox in her closet, and sometimes late at night when Emma was asleep, she'd take them out and read them, searching for the moment when Tommy's voice changed, when he stopped being her husband and became something else. She read portions aloud for the camera, her voice breaking occasionally. January 18th, 2018. Dear Emma, the ocean is bigger than I imagined. At night you can't tell where the water ends and the sky begins. It's like floating in space. There are no streetlights out here, no houses, no cars, just stars and water and the sound of the engine. I think you'd love it here, baby girl. It's scary but beautiful. Like looking at something you're not supposed to see. January 23rd. I fixed the generator in the engine room today. It had been making this awful grinding sound for weeks, and I figured out it was a loose belt coupling. The chief engineer, Leonard, said I did good, said I had good hands. Felt nice to be useful again. Felt like maybe I was making the right choice coming out here. She continued, January 31st. I miss you so much. I dream about you every night. In my dreams, you're always laughing, and I'm always home. I can smell your mother's cooking, hear the TV in the living room, feel the carpet under my feet. But then I wake up, and I'm in a bunk that smells like diesel and sweat, and I can hear the ocean groaning against the hull. It sounds angry, Em, like it's trying to get in. Diane stopped reading. She looked at the camera, her eyes red. That was the last letter. February 2nd, 2018. After that, nothing. Not a single word. When they brought him back to me 6 weeks later, I asked him why he stopped writing. He just looked at me and said, because I didn't want to lie to her. And if I told her the truth, she'd never sleep again. Leonard Russo had been the Atlantic Duchess's chief engineer for 12 years. He was a large man with oil-stained hands and a Boston accent, thick enough to spread on toast. He sat in his living room in Dorchester, surrounded by ship models he'd built during his retirement. An oxygen tank stood beside his chair, the tube running to his nose. Emphysema, the doctor said. Too many years breathing diesel fumes, but Leonard knew better. He knew what was really eating his lungs. February 3rd, around 10:30 at night, he said, lighting a cigarette despite the oxygen tank. His hands shook slightly. I was in my bunk, nearly asleep, when I heard singing coming through the intercom system. He took a long drag, exhaled slowly. I thought someone was screwing around at first. You get bored on these long hauls. Guys play pranks. But this wasn't a prank. This was something that shouldn't have been possible. The documentary played the actual audio recording, captured by the ship's internal security system. The timestamp read, February 3rd, 2018, 10:33 p.m. At first there was only static, the ambient hum of a ship's electrical system. Then, cutting through the white noise, a voice. Male, middle-aged, singing with the careful enunciation of someone who learned the words a lifetime ago. Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. The voice was clear, strong, and utterly impossible. It came through every speaker on the ship simultaneously. The mess hall, the bridge, the engine room, the crew quarters, everywhere at once. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh abide with me. But there was something wrong with the voice, something beneath it. A wetness, like the singer was drowning while singing. Water filling his lungs but somehow not stopping the words. Dr. Fletcher paused the recording. This audio has been analysed by 3 separate forensics labs, she said. MIT, the FBI, and a private firm in London that specialises in audio authentication. All 3 reached the same conclusion. It's not a hoax. It's not a radio signal from another vessel. It's not a recording being played back. The sound originated from inside the ship's intercom system, but according to the crew manifest, the security footage, and basic physics, that should have been impossible. No one was in a position to broadcast through the intercom. Henry Gibson appeared on screen again, his face grave. I was on the bridge when it started, he said. Captain Strand was there too, and our radio operator, David Park. We all heard it. David tried to trace the source, ran diagnostics on the system. Nothing. The intercom wasn't even turned on, but the singing kept coming through, clear as day. Leonard Russo nodded, in agreement when his interview resumed. I got up, went into the corridor. Other guys were coming out of their bunks too, all of us standing there in our underwear, listening. And I saw it on their faces, the same thing I was feeling. Not just confusion or fear, but recognition. Like we'd heard this before. Like we'd been hearing it our whole lives, but this was the first time we were really listening. The recording continued. Swift to its close ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim. Its glories pass away. Gibson spoke again. Carl Morrison, one of the deckhands, started crying. Just broke down right there. When I asked him what was wrong, he said the voice sounded like his father. But his father had drowned in a fishing accident when Carl was 12. Drowned in the North Atlantic. Then, after 90 seconds, the singing stopped. Complete silence filled the ship. We searched everywhere, Russo said. Every room, every corridor, every storage space, nothing. The radio room was empty. The intercom controls hadn't been touched. We even checked the cargo hold, thinking maybe someone had stowed away, but there was nothing down there except iron ore. He took another drag of his cigarette, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. But here's the thing nobody wants to talk about. When we were searching the ship, going room to room, I kept hearing footsteps behind me. Just one deck below, matching my pace. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I moved, they moved. I never saw anyone. But I wasn't alone in those corridors. None of us were. Carl Morrison had shared a bunk with Thomas Hartley. He was a deckhand from Portland, early 30s, with the kind of weathered face that comes from years of wind and salt. He agreed to be interviewed on the condition that his face not be shown and his voice disguised. He sat in shadow, backlit by a bright window, his silhouette trembling slightly. Thomas changed after that night, Morrison said, his voice electronically altered to a lower register. Not all at once, it was gradual, like watching someone drown in slow motion. He shifted in his chair. The next day, February 4th, Thomas volunteered to trace the audio signal. He was an electrician before joining the crew, so he knew the systems. He became obsessed, stopped eating regular meals, stopped showering. His letters to his daughter, the ones he'd write every night without fail, they just stopped. Morrison continued. I tried talking to him about it, asked if he was okay, if he needed to talk. He looked at me, and his eyes were different, emptier. He said, "Have you ever wondered where we go when we drown, Carl? Not our bodies. Our bodies sink. But where does everything else go?" I didn't know how to answer that. Over the next 5 days, Thomas barely slept. He crawled through maintenance shafts, traced wire runs, checked every speaker and junction box. He filled 3 notebooks with diagrams and notes mapping the ship's electrical system with obsessive precision. His handwriting deteriorated as the days progressed, becoming increasingly frantic and illegible. He'd mutter to himself, Morrison said. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and see him sitting on his bunk, staring at his notes, whispering. I asked him once what he was saying. He told me he was praying, but it wasn't any prayer I'd ever heard. The words were wrong, old, they didn't sound like English. He paused. February 9th, Thomas found something. The discovery happened at 2:17 in the afternoon during Thomas's off shift. He'd been tracing a power conduit through the bulkhead when he noticed something odd. Additional wiring that didn't appear on any electrical schematic he'd studied. The cables were old, corroded, insulated with cloth fabric instead of modern rubber. They ran through the walls like veins, hidden behind panels and tucked into shadows. Thomas followed them, pulling away access panels, squeezing through maintenance spaces, tracking the cables as they converged towards the lowest accessible deck, the cargo hold. Henry Gibson received Thomas's request at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He came to me, excited but also terrified, Gibson recalled. His hands were shaking, He said he'd found unauthorized wiring running to the hold, and he needed to investigate. I told him no initially. The hold was off limits during transit, safety regulations. But he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes. Desperation, like if I didn't let him go down there, he'd do it anyway. Gibson paused. I gave him permission to go down with Morrison and one of the other deckhands, Peter Novak. 3 men, 1 hour, report back. That was the rule. I should have gone with them. Maybe if I had, things would have turned out different. The 3 men descended into the cargo hold at 5:30 in the evening on February 10th. The space was massive, cathedral-like in its dimensions, lit only by harsh fluorescent strips that turned everything the colour of old bones. Mountains of iron ore rose around them, dark and glittering, shifting occasionally as the ship pitched in the swells. It was wrong down there, Morrison said. I felt it the moment we stepped off the ladder. The temperature was at least 20 degrees colder than it should have been, and the smell not like rust or oil, but like old paper, like books that had been underwater and then dried out. They followed the corroded cables through the ore, climbing over shifting piles of metal. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, throwing strange shadows. Morrison kept feeling like they were being watched, but whenever he turned around, there was nothing. Just darkness and iron and the groaning of the ship's hull. They found the source 30 minutes later. Nestled in a crevice between 2 mountains of ore was an old ship's radio, the kind used in the 1950s, all vacuum tubes and Bakelite knobs. It was impossibly corroded, more rust than metal, held together by salt and time. But the vacuum tubes glowed with a faint amber light, engraved on the side, barely visible beneath the corrosion. SS Covenant, 1952. I didn't want Thomas to touch it, Morrison said, his disguised voice cracking. Everything about that thing felt wrong, evil. I told him we should get Gibson, that we should leave it alone. But Thomas was already reaching for it. His hand was shaking, but he couldn't stop himself. Peter Novak, interviewed separately, corroborated the account. The moment Thomas's fingers touched the radio, the temperature dropped, Novak said. He was a quiet man in his 50s, now living in Arizona. He'd moved there specifically to be as far from the ocean as possible. I mean dropped. Our breath started fogging. Ice formed on the metal surfaces, and the radio, it just stopped. The glow in the tubes went out. Complete silence. Then Thomas started screaming. Not words, Morrison said, just screaming, like every nightmare he'd ever had was happening at once. His eyes were open, but he wasn't seeing us. He was seeing something else. Somewhere else. They dragged Thomas out of the hold. It took both of them, and he fought the entire way, clawing at the air, reaching back towards the radio. His lips were moving, forming words, but no sound came out. When they finally got him topside, Thomas collapsed. His hands were bleeding, the palms torn up like he'd been gripping rough rope. His lips were blue. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. He was breathing, Novak said, but he wasn't there. It was like his body was with us, but his mind was still down in the hold, or somewhere worse. Douglas Pierce had served as the ship's medic for 8 years. He treated everything from kitchen burns to broken bones, but nothing had prepared him for Thomas Hartley. When they brought him to me, he was in shock, Pierce said. He was retired now, living in Bar Harbor, his medical bag still packed and ready, despite having no patients. Vitals were normal. No fever, no physical trauma, beyond the lacerations on his hands. But he wasn't there, you know? His eyes were open, but nobody was home. Thomas spent February 11th and 12th in the medical bay, staring at the ceiling, unresponsive. He didn't speak, didn't eat, barely seemed to breathe. His heart rate was slow, his body temperature slightly below normal. Pierce tried everything. Stimulants, sedatives, talking to him, leaving him alone. Nothing worked. On the second day, I noticed something, Pierce said. Thomas's lips were moving, just slightly but constant. I leaned in close to hear what he was saying. Pierce's face went pale at the memory. He was counting, backwards, from 47, over and over. 47, 46, 45, all the way down to 1. Then he'd start again. 47. I asked him what the numbers meant, but he didn't respond. Just kept counting. Captain William Strand filed an incident report and made arrangements to divert to the Azores for emergency medical evacuation. The ship changed course, adding 3 days to the voyage. But on February 13th, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Thomas woke up. He sat up perfectly lucid and asked to speak to the captain, Pierce recalled. Apologised for causing trouble. Said he'd just been exhausted and the hold had been claustrophobic. He seemed completely normal, rational. He even smiled. Pierce's hands clenched. I should have sedated him right there. Should have kept him restrained. But he seemed fine, and I wanted to believe it. We all did. Captain Strand, whose logs were made available after his death, documented the conversation. Hartley presented as coherent and apologetic. Requested, returned to duty, claimed he'd experienced a panic attack due to exhaustion and confined spaces. Seemed embarrassed, promised it wouldn't happen again. Against my better judgment, I allowed him to resume light work. He specifically requested night watch on the main deck. Said fresh air would help. I approved. This was my final mistake. February 13th, 11 o'clock at night. Temperature 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind gusting to 40 knots. The Atlantic Duchess ploughed through heavy seas, her deck slick with spray, her hull groaning with each swell. Thomas Hartley stood at the forward equipment station checking the tension on the cargo boom chains. It was mindless work, muscle memory, which left his thoughts free to wander into places they shouldn't go. He tried not to think about the radio, about the sensation when he'd touched it, like plunging his hand into ice water that was somehow also burning, like touching a live wire made of frozen electricity. About the voice that had flooded his mind in that instant, speaking words in a language that predated language itself, words that carved themselves into his brain like knives, about what the voice had shown him. The ocean beneath the ocean, the place where drowned things go, the ships that sail below the ships, crewed by men who forgot they died, singing hymns that call the living down into the dark. He tried not to think about the counting. 47. The number kept appearing in his mind, glowing like the radio's tubes. 47 men on the Covenant. 47 souls collected. 47 voices singing in perfect harmony. The singing started at 11:34 at night. Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. But this time it wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from everywhere. From the air itself, from the deck plates beneath his feet, from the water, from the sky. The entire world was singing. The darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. Thomas walked to the starboard rail. He couldn't help it. His legs moved without consulting his brain, carrying him forward like a man in a dream, or a nightmare, or something worse than either. He looked out at the black water. At first he saw nothing, just darkness. The ship's running lights reflecting weakly off the churning surface. The ocean was angry tonight, waves crashing against the hull, spray flying high enough to sting his face with salt. Then, maybe 100 yards out, a light appeared beneath the waves. Faint, yellow, wavering, like an old oil lantern burning at the bottom of a well. Then another light, and another. They rose from the deep, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, ascending slowly through the black water like stars being born. They didn't break the surface, but hovered just beneath it, swaying with the current, forming patterns. constellations of drowned light. When other helpers fail and comforts flee. Thomas felt the temperature drop. It happened instantly, violently. One moment the air was cold, the next it was arctic. His breath crystallized and fell like snow, tiny ice particles that clinked against the deck like shattered glass. The spray on his face froze solid, coating his skin in a thin layer of ice. Help of the helpless, oh abide with me. The lights beneath the water began to move, not randomly, but with purpose. They formed a shape, a silhouette, a ship. The SS Covenant, sailing miles below the surface, her portholes glowing with warm yellow light, her deck crawling with figures that might have been men. She was intact, pristine, more real than the ship Thomas stood on. He could see every rivet, every line of rust, every detail. He could see men moving through her corridors, working her deck, climbing her rigging. All of them were singing. Beautiful, isn't it? Thomas spun around so fast he almost lost his balance. A man stood 15 feet behind him on the deck. He hadn't been there a moment ago. There had been no footsteps, no sound of a door opening, no warning of any kind. He was simply there, as if he'd always been there, as if the universe had just now remembered to make him visible. He wore a merchant marine uniform from the 1950s, the kind with the peaked cap and brass buttons. The uniform was immaculate, pressed, the buttons gleaming despite the spray and darkness. He was maybe 60 years old with grey hair and a weathered face that creased naturally into a smile. Kind eyes, grandfatherly. The sort of eyes that made you want to trust him, to tell him your secrets, to follow him wherever he led. But his shadow was wrong. It stretched across the deck in the wrong direction, away from the ship's lights instead of toward them. And it moved independently, shifting and writhing like something alive, like something trying to break free. "You can hear us, can't you, son?" the man said. His voice was gentle, with a faint Nova Scotia accent, tinged with warmth and infinite patience. "You've been hearing us since that first night. That's why we chose you. Out of all the souls on this ship, you're the one who can truly listen." Thomas tried to speak but couldn't. His jaw worked soundlessly, fog pouring from his mouth in thick clouds that didn't dissipate but pooled around his feet like spilled milk. "Where are my manners?" The man extended his hand, and Thomas noticed his fingers were too long, the joints bending at angles that shouldn't be possible. "Captain Ernst Winters, SS Covenant. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Hartley. I've been looking forward to this meeting for a very long time." Thomas knew that name. Everyone in the merchant marine knew that name. The SS Covenant had been a bulk carrier like the Atlantic Duchess, built in Quincy, Massachusetts in 1949. On November 8, 1952, during a nor'easter roughly 800 miles east of Newfoundland, she'd sent a distress signal and disappeared. All 47 crew members were lost. The wreckage was never found. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. The ocean remembers everything, doesn't let them go. "You're not real," Thomas whispered, finding his voice. "You're dead." "You've been dead for 66 years, Captain Winters laughed. A warm, genuine sound that somehow made everything worse. "Dead?" He shook his head, amused. "Oh no, son. We're not dead. Death is an ending. What we are is different. We're collected, preserved. We're sailing a truer ocean now, deeper than the one you see. We're part of something much larger than ourselves." He walked to the rail and gestured for Thomas to join him. Thomas's legs moved without his permission, carrying him forward until he stood beside the impossible captain. Up close he could smell the man. Salt and rust and something else, something organic and wrong, like meat left underwater for too long. "Look closely," Winters said, pointing down at the lights beneath the water. Thomas looked, and reality began to fracture. The lights weren't lanterns. They were portholes. and beneath the surface, impossibly far down, and yet somehow clearly visible, was the Covenant. Not a wreck, not a ruin, but a functioning vessel sailing through the black water miles below. Her running lights glowed warm and yellow, and through her portholes Thomas could see movement. Men, dozens of men, going about their duties. Walking corridors, manning the bridge, working in the engine room, climbing rigging that shouldn't exist underwater, all of them singing. But as Thomas watched, he realized the Covenant wasn't alone. More lights appeared in the deep. Other ships, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, stretching into the darkness as far as he could see. Old steamers and modern cargo vessels, fishing boats and naval frigates, tankers and trawlers. A fleet of impossible ships, crewed by impossible men, sailing through an impossible ocean that existed beneath the real one. "We went down in 1952, Winters said conversationally, like he was discussing the weather. "Storm took us by surprise, 40-foot waves, winds over 100 knots. We tried to fight it, but the ocean always wins in the end. 47 of us went down with the ship," he smiled, and Thomas saw that his teeth were too white, too perfect, like porcelain. But here's the thing nobody tells you about drowning at sea. It's not the end. It's a transfer. Your body dies, yes, but everything else, everything that makes you you, the ocean keeps that. Holds on to it. We woke up on the Covenant, deep below the surface, and we were still us, still crew. The ship was whole again, pristine, and we had a new purpose. Thomas heard himself ask, "What purpose?" Winters replied simply, "Collection. Every sailor who dies at sea ends up down there eventually. Some immediately, some decades later, but they all come. The ocean remembers them, and when their time comes, it calls them home. We sing the old hymns because they're what the living remember. The songs of church and childhood, of safety and comfort. We sing, and the living hear, and eventually they answer." More lights appeared below. Not just ships now, but individual lanterns, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, moving through the dark water like fireflies, each one a soul, each one collected. "How many?" Thomas whispered. Winters answered, "Since the first ship sank, millions. Every civilization that ever took to the sea, every sailor who ever drowned, they're all down there. Phoenicians, Vikings, Chinese, Polynesians. Your species has been feeding the deep ocean for 10,000 years. We're just the newest additions, the latest crew." Winters placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder, and it felt like ice burning through his coat, through his shirt, through his skin, straight into bone. "We've been calling specifically to you, Thomas Hartley, for 6 days now, since the moment you touched our radio." "Do you know why?" Thomas shook his head, unable to speak. "Because you're special. Your grandmother knew it. That's why she warned you. You have the gift, the ability to hear what most people can't, to see what shouldn't be seen. We need men like you, men who can serve as bridges between the fleet below and the ships above, men who can help us collect more efficiently." "No," Thomas managed. "I have a daughter, Emma. She's 7 years old. She needs me." Winter's smile widened, and for just a moment Thomas saw what was behind it. Not a man, not anything that had ever been human. Something older, something that wore humanity like a costume. Something that had been waiting at the bottom of the ocean since long before ships existed. "I had a daughter too," Winters said, and his voice was layered now, multiple voices speaking in unison. Some male, some female, some neither, all of them wet and cold. "Mary. She was 5 when I died. She lived another 53 years, had children of her own, grandchildren. When she finally died in 1995, cancer took her in a hospital bed, surrounded by family." He leaned closer. "She woke up on the Covenant 3 days later. The ocean had been holding a place for her since the moment I drowned. We had a lovely reunion. She's on the ship now, singing with us. Would you like to meet her?" Thomas jerked backward, but Winters' grip was iron. "Your Emma will live a long, full life," Winters continued, his multiple voices harmonizing horribly. "She'll grow up, fall in love, have children of her own. She'll be happy. She'll barely remember you. But when she dies, whether she's 90 or 100, whether she's anywhere near the ocean or thousands of miles inland, she'll wake up on a ship in the deep. And you'll be there, waiting for her. You'll show her around, introduce her to the crew, teach her the hymns." Thomas said through his tears, "That's not heaven, that's hell." All the lights beneath the water went out simultaneously. Complete darkness, no ship, no portholes, no lanterns, just infinite black. When the lights came back on, they were closer, much closer. The Covenant was directly beneath the Atlantic Duchess now, maybe 50 feet below the surface, rising slowly. Thomas could see the crew clearly through the portholes, men in various uniforms spanning a century, all of them staring up at him, all of them smiling, all of them singing. "There's no heaven," Winters said, and his face began to change, the flesh rippling like water, the features sliding into something else, something true. "There's no hell, there's just the ocean, and the ocean keeps everything, forever." His face had melted away entirely now, replaced by something that hurt to perceive. A void shaped like a man, a darkness that actively consumed light, filled with countless eyes that weren't eyes, mouths that weren't mouths, all of them opening and closing and singing in voices that predated sound. "Your name is already written in the Covenant's log," the thing that had been Winters said. "Has been since the moment you were born. Since before you were born. We've been waiting for you for a very long time, Thomas Hartley. Every sailor who ever lived is waiting for you. Your father, your grandfather, men whose names you don't know, but whose blood runs in your veins. 15 generations of Hartleys who died at sea, all of them on the ship below, all of them calling your name." Thomas looked down at his hands. They were blue, not from cold, blue like waterlogged flesh, like a corpse pulled from the ocean after days in the water. As he watched, seawater began to seep from his pores, running down his wrists, dripping onto the deck. His lungs felt heavy, full. He was drowning, drowning in air, drowning in truth. The ship beneath the Atlantic Duchess continued to rise. "You have 2 choices," the thing said. "You can jump now, join us willingly, and your transition will be gentle, peaceful. You'll close your eyes up here and open them down there, and it will be like waking from a bad dream. Or you can resist, live another 30, 40, 50 years. But every night, you'll hear us singing. Every time you close your eyes, you'll see the ships in the deep. And when you finally die, whether by drowning or old age or violence, you'll still wake up on the Covenant. But the weight will have made you bitter, broken. You'll spend eternity regretting that you didn't accept our invitation when it was given freely." Thomas looked down at the Covenant. It was close enough now that he could read the names painted on the life preservers, hanging from its rails. Close enough to see individual faces pressed against portholes. Close enough to see children among the crew, dozens of children, some no older than Emma. "How long?" Thomas whispered. "How long does the voyage last?" The thing that wore Winters' uniform laughed, and it was the sound of every drowned man who ever lived, laughing simultaneously. "Forever is such an inadequate word," it said. "The ocean is older than your sun. It will exist long after your sun dies. We've been sailing these depths since before your species learned to make fire. We'll be sailing them when your species is extinct. The voyage doesn't last forever, Thomas. The voyage is forever. Time doesn't exist down there. Only water and darkness and singing. Only the eternal collection." Thomas climbed onto the rail. Below him, the Covenant's deck was clearly visible now. He could see men standing on it, looking up at him, gesturing for him to jump, welcoming him home. Among them, he recognized faces from old family photos. His great-great-grandfather, lost in a fishing accident in 1912. His father's uncle, drowned in the Navy during the Korean War. Men he'd never met, but who shared his blood, his name, his fate. All of them singing, "Swift to its close ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away." Thomas whispered, "I'm sorry, Emma. Daddy tried. Daddy tried so hard to fix everything. But some things can't be fixed. Some debts were paid before we were born." He lifted one leg over the rail. The ocean below wasn't black anymore. It was glowing, phosphorescent, beautiful and terrible, full of lights that went down forever. Not just ships, he realized. The entire ocean floor was covered in lights. Cities of drowned vessels, civilizations of the collected, stretching across the seafloor like constellations, like galaxies, like reality itself, was nothing but drowned ships all the way down. "Thomas!" Hands grabbed him from behind, strong hands pulling him backward. "Carl Morrison!" Thomas fought, screamed, tried to reach the rail, but Morrison held tight. Other crew members appeared. 4 men needed to restrain Thomas as he clawed at the air, reaching for the ship below, reaching for the truth. "Let me go!" Thomas screamed, and seawater poured from his mouth instead of the sound. Liters of it, impossible amounts flooding the deck. "They're waiting! I have to go! My name is in the log! Let me go!" His voice wasn't his own anymore. It was 47 voices speaking in unison. The entire crew of the Covenant, speaking through his throat. "We've been waiting so long, the voyage is eternal. Come down to the true ocean, come down and sing with us forever." They dragged him below deck as he wept salt water and sang hymns in languages that had been dead for millennia. The last thing Thomas saw before they pulled him through the hatch was the thing on the deck. The void shaped like Captain Winters. It waved goodbye, a friendly gesture, a patient gesture. It wasn't upset that Thomas had been stopped. It had all the time in the world. The Atlantic Duchess diverted to Ponta Delgada in the Azores, arriving on February 16th. Thomas was sedated, restrained, and transferred to a psychiatric facility in Lisbon. 3 days later, after evaluations and paperwork and phone calls between governments, he was extradited back to the United States. Dr. Anne Fletcher received him at St. Michael's Psychiatric Hospital on February 21st, 2018. "The man they brought me wasn't the man from those home videos," she said. "The body was the same. The face was the same. But whoever Thomas Hartley had been, that person was gone. What was left was something else, something hollowed out and filled with deep water." The security footage showed Thomas in his room, 6 years after his arrival. He sat by the window perfectly still, staring out at the Atlantic. His lips moved constantly, soundlessly. "For the first 3 months, he wouldn't speak," Dr. Fletcher continued. "Complete mutism. He'd just sit by the window, watching the ocean, lips moving. We thought he was praying. Later, I realized he was counting, always backwards, from 47 to 1, over and over, for 3 months. Then, one day I came in for our session, and he looked at me and spoke his first words since the ship. 'Do you ever wonder what happens when we die, Dr. Fletcher? Not what we hope happens, but what really happens?' Dr. Fletcher's expression was haunted. I told him that was a question for philosophers and priests. He smiled, and for just a moment, I saw what the crew of the Atlantic Duchess must have seen. Something behind his eyes that shouldn't be there. Something looking out through him. He said, 'I can tell you exactly what happens. Would you like to know?' I didn't answer. I couldn't, because part of me, the part that's supposed to be rational and scientific, was terrified that he actually could tell me, and that I might believe him. Over the following 6 years, Dr. Fletcher tried every treatment available: antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, therapy, cognitive behavioral techniques, even experimental treatments involving ketamine and psilocybin. Nothing worked because Thomas didn't think he needed to be cured. He thought he was simply waiting. "He's been a model patient in every way except one," Dr. Fletcher said. "He follows the rules, takes his medication without complaint, participates in group therapy, but he refuses to stop believing in what he saw. And honestly, after 6 years of treating him, of hearing his account, of investigating the incident, I'm not sure I want him to stop believing." She opened the thick file and pulled out a drawing. It showed a ship underwater surrounded by lights, with stick figures visible through the portholes. The detail was extraordinary, every rivet and rope rendered with obsessive precision. "He draws this constantly," she said, "the SS Covenant. Sometimes he adds other ships, hundreds of them, filling entire sketchbooks, and he labels them. Names, dates, locations. I started researching them. The ships are real, every single one. Vessels that actually sank, on the exact dates he listed, in the exact locations." She pulled out more drawings, pages and pages of them, ships covering every inch of paper. How could he know these details? He has no internet access, no maritime history books, no contact with anyone who could provide this information. And yet, every ship he draws is historically accurate. More pages, hundreds of ships, thousands maybe. "Last month, he drew a new ship," Dr. Fletcher said quietly, "a fishing trawler called the Mary Catherine. I looked it up. It sank off the coast of Nova Scotia on October 15th, 2023. 3 weeks after, Thomas drew it. She let that hang in the air. He knew it would sink before it sank, or something using him knew. Either possibility is impossible." She pulled out one more drawing, recent, the paper still white and crisp. It showed a simple scene, a man in a hospital bed, an older woman sitting beside him, holding his hand. Both figures were smiling, but beneath them, barely visible, was a ship. And on the ship's deck, 2 figures waiting, labels above them. Thomas Hartley and Emma Hartley. Dr. Fletcher said he drew this 2 days ago. That woman is Diane, Thomas's ex-wife. And that man, the physical features match Emma's high school boyfriend, a boy named Daniel Shaw. They've been dating for 6 months. Thomas has never met him. Diane specifically keeps Emma's current life private. There's no way Thomas could know about Daniel. And yet, he drew him. Drew them together, 50 years in the future, dying side by side, with Thomas and Emma waiting on the ship below. She closed the file. Thomas claims that when you touch the deep ocean, when you really touch it, you can see time differently. Not just the past, but the future. All the souls that will eventually join the fleet. He says he can see their names in the ship's log, written in water and darkness. Every person who will ever drown. Every person whose blood carries the debt of ancestors lost at sea. I asked him if my name was in the log. She paused. He looked at me with something like pity and said, "Everyone's name is in the log, Dr. Fletcher. Some are just written in darker ink." The documentary's present-day interview with Thomas took place in a small conference room, with afternoon light streaming through barred windows. Dr. Fletcher sat beside him for support, though he'd insisted he didn't need it. He looked older than 38, his hair prematurely grey, his face carrying the kind of exhaustion that sleep never touches, but his eyes were clear, sharp, and utterly calm. He'd agreed to speak on camera after 6 years of silence to the outside world, and he'd made only one request: that Emma be allowed to watch this before anyone else, so she could hear it from him in his own words, what was waiting for both of them. "I know how this sounds," he began, his voice soft but absolutely steady, the ravings of a crazy man, ghost ships and dead captains, and an ocean beneath the ocean. Believe me, I've had 6 years to consider that possibility. 6 years of medication designed to convince me that what I experienced was a hallucination, that Captain Winters was a stress-induced delusion, that the Covenant is just a wreck rusting at the bottom of the sea, nothing more. He leaned forward slightly. But you can't medicate away truth. You can cloud it, suppress it, hide it behind chemical walls. But it's still there, waiting, and I've spent 6 years learning to see through those walls. The ocean is not what you think it is. It's not just water. It's a mouth, a stomach, an intelligence so old and vast that calling it God would be an insult to its magnitude. It's been collecting souls since the first living thing crawled into the sea billions of years ago. Every drowned thing, every sunken vessel, every sailor lost to the waves. The ocean keeps them, preserves them, makes them part of itself. The Covenant isn't a ghost ship. It's a functioning vessel crewed by functional men. They eat, they sleep, they work their shifts, they sing their hymns. They're not suffering, they're not in pain. They're just sailing, forever, through waters that exist in the spaces between spaces, in the depths below depths, in an ocean that occupies the same physical space as the one you see, but exists in a different layer of reality. He pulled out a small notebook, worn and dog-eared, from constant use. I've been keeping a log of my own, names of people I see in my dreams, faces that appear when I look at the ocean. I write them down, along with dates. Then I wait. He opened the notebook. Page after page of names, dates, locations. Some crossed out, some circled. These are people who are going to drown. I see them before it happens. Carl Morrison. I saw him 3 days before he killed himself. Captain Strand. I saw him a week before his heart attack. The Mary Catherine. I saw that entire crew 2 weeks before their ship went down. The interviewer asked, "How?" Thomas replied, "Because time doesn't work the same way down there. When you touch the deep ocean, really touch it, it touches you back. And once it touches you, you're connected. You can see what it sees. The past and the future and the eternal present, all happening simultaneously. Every person who's ever drowned and every person who ever will, they're all already on the ships, already singing. We just haven't caught up to that moment yet." He closed the notebook. "My name is in the Covenant's log, written in ink, made from deep water and dead stars. I've seen it. I've seen the moment I die, though I don't know when it will be. I've seen myself waking up on that ship, Captain Winters, greeting me with that same kind smile, welcoming me aboard. And I've seen Emma, decades from now, an old woman, dying peacefully in her sleep next to her husband. And 3 days later, waking up on a different ship, younger than she was, more real than she ever was in life. And I'll be there, waiting for her. Because that's what love is, in the end. Waiting, calling, singing someone home through the dark." His voice finally cracked. "I'm not afraid anymore, Dr. Fletcher. Fear is for people who think they have a choice. I don't. None of us do. The ocean decided my fate before I was born, before my father was born, before the first Hartley ever looked at the sea and thought I could cross that. Every sailor who ever lived is paying a debt incurred the first time humanity built a boat. We owe the ocean ourselves, our bodies, our souls, our children's children's children. The debt compounds forever. Tell Emma I'm sorry. Tell her Daddy didn't fix everything after all. Tell her I failed. But tell her this too, when her time comes many years from now. I'll be waiting. She'll hear singing, and she'll recognize my voice among all the others, and she'll know it's time. She'll walk down through the water, and I'll be there on the deck with Captain Winters and all the others, and I'll take her hand, and I'll say, 'Welcome home, baby girl. We have so much sailing to do.'" He looked directly into the camera, and for just a moment, his eyes reflected light they shouldn't have, like he was looking up through deep water at the sun. To everyone watching this, the ocean is waiting for you too. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in your lifetime, but eventually. Your name is already written in the log. The ships below know your face. And when you die, whether by drowning or in your sleep or stepping in front of a bus, you'll wake up on a deck somewhere in the eternal fleet. You'll hear singing, and you'll understand that death was never an ending. It was always just a transfer, from one ship to another, from one ocean to another. And you'll sail forever through waters that go down past the foundation of the world, past reality itself, into places where time is just another current to navigate. You'll become part of something larger than yourself, part of the collection, part of the ocean. He smiled, and it was the saddest thing the documentary crew had ever captured. I'm not crazy. I'm just the only one honest enough to tell you where we're all going. The interview ended. Dr. Fletcher walked Thomas back to his room, her hand on his shoulder. Through the window, the Atlantic stretched to the horizon, grey and restless under an overcast sky. Just before the door closed, Thomas stopped and looked back at the camera one last time. "Listen tonight," he said, "when it's quiet and you're alone. You'll hear them singing. We're always singing. And one day you'll sing with us." The door closed. Dr. Robert Ashford was a maritime historian at Boston University, specializing in ship disappearances and nautical folklore. His office was cluttered with models and maps, walls covered with photographs of vessels lost at sea. He was in his 70s now, close to retirement, but his passion for the subject hadn't dimmed. "The SS Covenant is one of the great mysteries of modern maritime history," he said, pointing to a black and white photograph of the ship in harbour, her crew standing on deck in their work clothes smiling for the camera. 47 faces, ordinary men who had no idea what was coming. Built in Quincy, Massachusetts in 1949, she was a workhorse, nothing fancy but reliable, made dozens of successful Atlantic crossings, carried iron ore, grain, machinery, standard bulk carrier work. He pulled out a folder, marked Covenant Incident, November 1952. On November 8th, 1952, during a nor'easter about 800 miles east of Newfoundland, she sent a distress signal to the Coast Guard. Standard stuff at first, taking on water, listing heavily, requesting immediate assistance. But here's where it gets strange. He played a crackling audio recording preserved in the Coast Guard archives for 70 years. The quality was poor, but the words were clear. Static, wind howling, the sound of metal groaning under stress. Then a voice strained but surprisingly calm. "This is the SS Covenant. Position 48.7 degrees north, 32.6 degrees west. We're going down. Water breached the engine room. List is 30 degrees and increasing. We have approximately 10 minutes. Tell our families we love them. Tell them we're not afraid. Tell them..." The voice cut off. More static, more wind, the sound of waves crashing. Then, unmistakably, singing. Multiple male voices harmonizing despite the storm. "Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens. Lord, with me, abide." The singing continued for another 20 seconds, clear and strong and impossibly calm. Men singing hymns as their ship went down, as the ocean rushed in to claim them. Then the transmission ended. Just stopped. Complete silence. "No wreckage was ever found," Ashford said quietly. "The Coast Guard searched for 3 weeks. They covered over 1,000 square miles. Nothing. No debris, no bodies, no oil slick. It was as if the Covenant and her entire crew had simply ceased to exist." He pulled out a map of the North Atlantic marked with dozens of red marks, each one labelled with a ship name and date. Over the decades there have been reports. Not many but consistent. Fishermen claiming to hear hymns during storms, always in that general area. Sailors reporting lights beneath their ships, moving in formation like a convoy. In 1978, a research submarine captured sonar readings of a large object on the seafloor at roughly the Covenant's last known position. The object was approximately 400 feet long, consistent with a bulk carrier, but when they returned 3 days later with cameras, there was nothing there, just empty ocean floor. He pointed to several other marks on the map, similar reports from other disappearance sites. The Waratah vanished off South Africa in 1909. The Cyclops lost in the Bermuda Triangle in 1918. The Marine Sulphur Queen disappeared in 1963. All of them reported as being seen by other vessels decades after their disappearances. Ships that shouldn't exist, sailing in waters too deep for ships to sail. The interviewer asked, "Do you believe any of it?" Ashford was quiet for a long moment, looking at his map, at all those red marks representing thousands of lives lost to the ocean. "I've spent 40 years studying ship disappearances," he finally said. "I've read every report, every testimony, every piece of folklore, and I've noticed something, a pattern. Sailors who survive near-drowning experiences, who are pulled from the water at the last moment, they often report the same thing, singing. They say they heard voices calling to them, welcoming them, telling them to stop fighting and let the water in. Old hymns mostly, songs their grandparents sang." He turned from the map. "The rational explanation is that drowning causes auditory hallucinations, as the brain is starved of oxygen. The irrational explanation is that there's something down there, something that's been down there since before humans existed, something that collects, that calls, that sings. I've never been a religious man, but the ocean makes you reconsider what's possible. We've explored less than 5% of the seafloor. The deep ocean, the really deep parts, they're as alien to us as outer space. Who knows what's down there? What's been down there for millions of years, waiting?" He pulled out one more document, recent, dated 6 months ago. Last year, a deep-sea drilling operation in the North Atlantic reported something unusual. At a depth of 12,000 feet, their instruments detected what they described as organized sound. Not geological, not biological, but organized. When they enhanced the recording and slowed it down, it sounded like singing. Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, harmonizing at a frequency just below human hearing. He played the recording. It had been scrubbed of static, amplified, slowed to half speed. Even then, it was barely audible. But it was there, a chorus of voices singing in perfect harmony, rising from the deepest parts of the ocean. "Abide with me, fast falls the eventide." Ashford stopped the recording. The drilling company classified this as an equipment malfunction and moved their operation. But I've heard that recording 100 times. That's not a malfunction. That's a choir. He looked directly at the camera. "I think something happened to the Covenant. Something that's been happening to ships since humans first put to sea. I think the ocean takes them, not just their physical hulls, but something more. Their essence, their purpose. And I think those ships are still down there, still sailing, still crewed, not by ghosts, but by something real that we simply don't have the context to understand." "Do you think Thomas Hartley is telling the truth?" The interviewer's question hung in the air. "I think Thomas Hartley touched something he shouldn't have touched. I think he opened a door that should have stayed closed. And I think whatever he saw down in that cargo hold, whatever spoke to him through that old radio, it was real as this table, as real as the ocean, as real as death." He closed his folder. "The ocean keeps its dead. That's not folklore, that's fact. Bodies sink and are never found. Ships disappear without a trace. And sometimes in the quiet moments, sailors hear singing coming from the deep. I've heard it myself, twice during research voyages. once off the coast of Newfoundland, once near the Mariana Trench. Both times the hymn was the same: "Abide with me." The interviewer asked, "What did you do when you heard it?" Ashford smiled grimly. "I went below deck and didn't come back up until we'd left the area, because I'm a coward and I don't want to know. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some doors are better left closed. But Thomas Hartley, he opened the door. And now he can't close it. He'll hear that singing for the rest of his life. And when he dies, wherever he goes, whatever happens to his soul, I think he'll find out he was right all along." The documentary's final sequence was filmed at dawn. The camera positioned on the shore outside St. Michael's Psychiatric Hospital. The sun was rising over the Atlantic, painting the water in shades of orange and red and gold. Beautiful, deceptively peaceful. Dr. Fletcher stood at the water's edge, waves lapping at her shoes. 6 years, she said. 6 years of treating Thomas Hartley. 6 years of trying to convince him that what he experienced was a trauma-induced psychotic break, that the Covenant is just a wreck, that Captain Winters was a hallucination, that the singing is nothing more than his brain trying to process extreme stress. She picked up a smooth stone and threw it into the water. It skipped twice before sinking, but here's what I haven't told anyone. Not my colleagues, not my supervisors, not my family. She turned to face the camera. I hear it too now. The singing. Started about 3 years ago, very faint at first, easy to dismiss as tinnitus or imagination. But it's gotten louder, clearer. I hear it at night mostly when everything's quiet. A chorus of male voices singing hymns I vaguely remember from my grandmother's church. And the strange thing is, it's not frightening. It's comforting. Like a lullaby. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. I'm a psychiatrist. I know what this means. Either I'm developing auditory hallucinations due to prolonged exposure to Thomas's delusions, a phenomenon called folie à deux, or Thomas is right. And I'm hearing the same thing he heard, the same thing sailors have been hearing for thousands of years, the ocean calling us home. She pulled out her own notebook, smaller than Thomas's, but similar. I started keeping track. Dreams about ships, about drowning, about walking across the ocean floor and seeing lights in the distance. I wrote down dates, details. Then I started researching. She opened the notebook. 3 of my patients have died in the past year. Natural causes, no connection to each other. But I saw all 3 of them in my dreams before they died. Saw them walking toward ships in the deep. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. All 3 of them drowned. One fell into his bathtub during a seizure and drowned in 6 inches of water. One aspirated on his own vomit in his sleep and drowned in his own fluids. One died of pulmonary edema, essentially drowning in the fluid accumulating in his lungs. 3 different causes, but the same result: drowning. She closed the notebook. Thomas told me last week that he saw me in his latest drawing. On a ship. Not the Covenant. A different one. Newer. A hospital ship, he said. From World War II. Called the Comfort. He said I'll join its crew when I die, help treat the others as they arrive. He said that's what I'm meant to do. Care for the drowned as they transition to their new vessels. I looked up the Comfort. It sank in 1945 after hitting a mine off the coast of Okinawa. 237 people died. No wreckage ever found. She looked back at the ocean. I'm not supposed to say this. It violates every ethical guideline, every professional standard. But I'm going to say it anyway because someone needs to. I believe Thomas Hartley. I believe the Covenant is real. I believe the ocean collects souls. I believe that when we die, especially those of us connected to the sea, we don't go to heaven or hell. We go down to the ships that sail in eternal darkness, crewed by the drowned, singing hymns to call the living home. and I think it's been happening since the first human looked at the ocean and decided to cross it. We made a deal with the deep water when we built the first boat. We didn't know we were making it, but we made it, and the ocean never forgets a deal. She walked back toward the hospital, sand clinging to her shoes. Thomas Hartley will die someday. Maybe in this hospital, maybe elsewhere, but he'll die. And when he does, I think he'll wake up exactly where he thinks he will. On the Covenant with Captain Winters and 46 other souls, sailing through waters that exist beneath and between our reality. And someday, probably sooner than I'd like to think, I'll die too. And I'll wake up on the Comfort, and I'll resume my work, and I'll wait for the next arrivals, and the next, and the next, forever. She reached the hospital entrance and stopped, looking back one last time. If you're watching this, listen tonight. When it's quiet, you might hear it. The singing. It's always been there, rising from the deep places. We've just learned to ignore it, to rationalize it away. But it's there. The ocean is waiting for all of us. Our names are already written in the logs of ships that haven't sunk yet. Ships that won't sink for decades or centuries. But they're waiting. Patient. Eternal. And when our time comes, we'll hear the hymns, and we'll walk toward the water, and we'll sink down, down, down through the layers of reality, through the boundaries of death, into the true ocean. The one that exists beneath this one. The one that collects everything. The one that never lets go. She walked inside. The door closed behind her. The camera held on the ocean, waves rolling endlessly toward the shore. Dawn light made the water look almost inviting, almost safe. Then, barely audible beneath the sound of surf, so quiet it might have been imagination, singing. The screen faded to black. Text appeared. The wreckage of the SS Covenant has never been found. Another line. Thomas Hartley remains in psychiatric care at St. Michael's Hospital. Another. Dr. Anne Fletcher died by drowning on March 3, 2024, when her car went off a bridge during a storm. She was found 2 days later, still strapped in her seat, 5 miles downstream. Her autopsy revealed salt water in her lungs despite drowning in fresh water. Final line. On calm nights, fishermen off the coast of Newfoundland still report hearing hymns rising from the deep. One more line appeared. If you listen closely, you might hear them too. One final image appeared, a photograph from inside St. Michael's Hospital, taken by a security camera at 3:47 in the morning, 3 days after Dr. Fletcher's death. It showed Thomas's room. He stood at the window looking out at the ocean, but in the reflection on the glass, dozens of figures stood behind him. Men and women in various maritime uniforms spanning a century. All of them watching Thomas. All of them smiling. And in the center of the group, barely visible, Captain Ernst Winters. Beside him, Dr. Anne Fletcher wearing a World War II nurse's uniform. Both of them singing. The image held for 10 seconds, then faded to black. In the darkness, the singing continued. Not a recording, not a sound effect. Real voices harmonizing in perfect 4-part harmony, rising from somewhere deep and old and patient. Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide, the darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh abide with me. The singing faded slowly, taking minutes to completely disappear, as if reluctant to stop, as if it wanted to be heard, wanted to be believed. When silence finally returned, it wasn't really silence. It was the sound of something waiting. The sound of an ocean that remembers everything. The sound of ships sailing in waters too deep for light to reach. Crewed by souls who forgot they drowned, singing hymns that would echo through eternity. The sound of home for those who belong to the sea. The sound of collection. Somewhere right now, at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, The SS Covenant is sailing through the dark. Captain Ernst Winters stands on her bridge, steady hands on a wheel that's been turning for 70 years. His crew works around him, 47 souls performing their duties with the precision that comes from eternal repetition. And in the communications room, Thomas Hartley sits at an old radio, one that looks suspiciously like the corroded device he found in the cargo hold of the Atlantic Duchess. He's broadcasting, sending out the hymns on frequencies that don't exist on any maritime chart, calling to ships that sail in the water above, to crews that don't know they're already marked, already collected, already written in the log. His daughter Emma is 73 now, living in Portland, grandmother to 6 children, great-grandmother to 2. She has a good life, happy, full. She barely remembers her father, just vague impressions of a man who left when she was young and never came back. Not really, but sometimes, late at night, she hears singing, and Thomas hears her listening, and he smiles, patient and eternal, because he knows the truth that everyone eventually learns. The ocean always gets what it's owed, and every debt is paid in salt and darkness and singing. Every single one, forever. The documentary ends, but the ocean doesn't. It continues vast and patient, singing its ancient songs to anyone who will listen. And one by one, over years and decades and centuries, people listen. They hear the hymns rising from the deep. They see the lights beneath the waves. They feel the pull of something older than time, calling them home. And when their moment comes, when death finally claims them in whatever form it takes, they sink. Down through the water, down through reality, down into the true ocean where the ships sail forever. They wake up on a deck somewhere in the eternal fleet. The wood is solid beneath their feet. The air smells of salt and rust and eternity. And around them voices sing in harmony, welcoming them home. Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. They join the chorus, they learn the routes through the deep places. They sail through waters that have no surface and no floor, that extend infinitely in all directions, that exist in the spaces between heartbeats and the gaps between stars. And they sing to call the others, to guide the living down, to collect the debts that were promised long ago, when the first human looked at the ocean and thought, I can cross that. The ocean always collects, and the voyage is eternal. And everyone eventually comes home. This is not a story. This is a warning. This is a promise. This is the truth that sailors have known since the first ship sailed. The ocean is not water. It's a mouth. And it's always hungry. And it's singing right now, just beneath the threshold of your hearing, calling your name. Listen closely tonight. When it's quiet and you're alone, you might hear your name in the chorus. And if you do, don't be afraid. Don't fight it. Just know that somewhere, on a ship at the bottom of the world, someone is waiting for you. Someone who loves you, who's been waiting decades or centuries or longer, keeping your place warm, ready to show you around, ready to teach you the hymns, ready to welcome you home, to the only home that matters, the only home that lasts, the ships in the deep, sailing forever.